local papers, alternative papers, online media, radio, broadcast TV, statewide media. With so many options, how do you know what the elected official you're trying to influence is paying attention to? You have limited resources, so you don't want to waste your time working in the wrong space. You want the biggest return possible on your effort. But how do you do that? Did you know there's a media hierarchy in politics? There's some media the politicians don't pay attention to, and there's some they give more credence to than you might think. Stick around to find out about the media influence hierarchy. Hi everyone, I'm David Smith, and I run Inthrive Advocacy Solutions, your solution for lobbying, advocacy, and strategic planning. Before launching this firm, I was leading advocates in Virginia, and we brought real changes to our criminal justice system. I also worked for a senior legislator in the House of Delegates, where I ran her commerce and energy docket. Now, I'm bringing what I've learned through mentors and hard knocks to you. Welcome to Better Advocacy in 10 Minutes or Less. This is a series of videos helping you become a better advocate so you can turn your passion into policy. Today, we're going to discover the media influence hierarchy. Now, in my last video on how to get press, I mentioned the hierarchy of media influence. If you don't remember, you should watch that video. But here's the list of media from most influential to least influential on politicians. The state's major newspapers, a politician's local newspaper, that local TV news, that broadcast news, and then finally, those online-only outlets. Let's take a look at these and see why politicians and policymakers pay attention to them and what areas are most influential. Now, I know what you're thinking. Why are newspapers on the top of the list? Aren't papers yesterday's news and on the way out with shrinking newsrooms and less editions? Yes, that's true, but they are the reliable source for in-depth reporting that's easy to share. So, what do I mean by reliable and easy to share? Reliable because they have a reputation of reporting factual information without a lot of partisan spin. They've gained this through years of work. Easy to share is essential because the truth is state legislatures work on a fast and furious schedule. Yes, everyone is absolutely worn out. So either you have a short session about a month or two, like in my home state of Virginia, and yes, this is an actual picture of a calendar that hung in one of the halls, and you're forced to vote on thousands of bills in a matter of weeks, or your state has a full-time legislature that spreads the work out over months, but still seems to push individual bills through quickly, like New York or California. Either way, aides and staff are looking for reporting they can copy and paste into briefing documents for their legislators. They don't want to have to watch a video and take notes and write summaries. With newspapers, all they have to do is copy and paste the pertinent text into a doc and share that with their legislator. 30 seconds and they're done. Okay, well, maybe 41 seconds according to this little graphic here. But not all papers are created equal. What's the difference between a statewide paper and a local paper? Now, statewide papers are usually the biggest in the state and have original reporting on statewide politics and larger policy issues in addition to local reporting. Usually they're published daily and are in the capital city and the largest cities. On the other hand, local papers may still run articles on statewide issues, but they're often wire stories where the original reporting was done by someone at the statewide paper. So the statewide paper is more important for two reasons. First, it's more authoritative because usually you will have your more seasoned reporters working for it. These are folks who know how to craft an article and get the quotes and inside scoop. Secondly, because it's speaking to a larger audience, politicians are more likely to listen to it. In Virginia, the two major papers are the Richmond Times-Dispatch and the Washington Post. The Post is really a national paper, but it is a major paper that covers Virginia's largest population center of Northern Virginia. The Richmond Times-Dispatch is the major Richmond paper. And while Metro Richmond is the third largest metro area, Hampton Roads is also bigger, the Times-Dispatch is more important because it covers more of the statewide politics. If a legislator wants to get an op-ed placed, they're going for this paper, or the Washington Post, over one at Hampton Roads or Roanoke because it gets more visibility. But at the same time, don't ignore the local press. They're number two on our hierarchy. These smaller papers are often easier to get stories placed in. If you have someone who can speak as a local to the paper, that's an added bonus. You see, they want the interesting policy content that's connected to their readership or region, but don't often have the budget to hire someone to write it like you do with the big papers. You can help fill that need with well-crafted press releases and by developing relationships with the reporting staff. If your targeted legislator is from a more rural area where there may be a distrust of what's happening in the capital urban centers, a well-written opinion piece or positive media coverage in their hometown paper will carry a lot of weight. All right, next up is local TV news. Now, you might think this should be higher, and if we're talking about influencing public opinion, I probably would bump it up. But we're talking about influencing politicians. TV news is great on visuals, but not so great on in-depth reporting. Think about what leads on a newscast versus what's on the front page of a newspaper. TV news usually starts with great visuals: house fires, car accidents, natural disasters. These are things that visually get your attention, but don't require a lot of reporting. Newspapers, on the other hand, lead with catchy headlines and big articles that require in-depth reporting. Also, remember what I said about overworked aides? They need stuff they can copy and paste into briefings, things that politicians can glance at and understand. TV news doesn't lend itself to this style of communication. Now, it's still important. If you can get a reporter to cover your event, that's great because it will build public awareness and momentum for you. It's a stepping stone, not the end goal. Finally, we have online-only news sites. These can be local or national. These are at the bottom because they tend to be more partisan and less authoritative, so politicians and their staff are less likely to pay attention to them. Remember, just because it's not good for influencing a politician doesn't mean it's not worth your time. If you're trying to raise awareness about your issue and you aren't getting anywhere with local press, then do the online news. And once it runs, share that with local press to show your topic is newsworthy. Also, this type of press can help you find new people who support your cause. And those extra helpers can sway political opinions. Now, there are some exceptions to this since some online media is viewed positively. In Virginia, we have the Virginia Mercury, a relatively new online news source that's part of the state's newsroom network. However, it is staffed mainly with folks who used to work for big papers throughout the state. While its editorials and story topics are left-leaning, it is recognized as an online-only authoritative source. Many other states have similar news outlets, so it pays to understand what the media landscape is in your state. All right, one last note: media to be wary about. Oscar Wilde said, "The only thing worse than being talked about is not being talked about." Yes, this is 2 videos in a row where I've quoted Oscar Wilde. But you don't need to tell everyone about all your press. If you're fortunate enough to get coverage in a news outlet that's partisan, that's great. But you have to think about what that means to your target politician. Just like the Fox News, MSNBC partisan divide, there are partisan divides in national papers too. The Wall Street Journal is a conservative paper, while the New York Times is a liberal paper. Partisan politicians want to avoid or even shut down what the other side is promoting. If I'm trying to convince right-of-center electeds, getting in a liberal news outlet like the New York Times or your local alternative weekly won't help me. If I'm trying to convince left of center folks of something, then getting an article in a conservative small town paper won't do me much good. I want the media coverage, but I'm not going to be sharing that when I have my meetings with these electeds and their staff. Be strategic with your media choices when working with more partisan press outlets, and be strategic about how you share those clippings. All right, here's your recap of media from most influential to least influential on politicians. Remember, the top one, that's your state's major newspapers. Then, the politician's local newspaper, followed by broadcast TV news, and finally at the bottom are those online-only outlets. And each one of these can be helpful, but it is important to understand what politicians are paying attention to. Okay, I hope this short training video helped you. What do you think? Do you agree, or have you had a different experience? Let me know in the comments below. Like and subscribe to the Inthrive Advocacy channel to get notifications of new videos. Be sure to check back every Friday for a new Better Advocacy in 10 minutes or less video.